Sports Bar and Grill, 19th Hole Clubhouse, and Ice Pick Vodka Studios. On the Tampa St. Pete Sports Connection radio network, streaming on FloridaSportsStream.com. Tee it high and let it fly on the T Florida and Ice Pick Vodka.
Hello there, Tampa Bay. This is former NFL and college football coach Jimmy Johnson. Listen to the Kelly Show every Monday starting at 5 p.m. They can sure use the attention.
And this is former Major League Baseball player, Hall of Famer Wade Boggs. I also hope you listen to the Kelly Show every Monday starting at 5 p.m. They can darn sure use the money.
Hi there. This is marine wildlife artist and conservationist Dr. Guy Harvey. Please listen to the Kelly Show every Monday starting at 5 p.m. They need to feel worthy.
Tampa Bay's Tan Talk. Entertaining and informative radio for the Sunshine State.
It's time for FLA Law, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. We are back in the studio here at WTAN. My name is attorney Jacqueline Bryant, and I'm one of the personal injury attorneys at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. And of course, I have the pleasure of being here with my colleague and longtime coworker, Lori Robinson. And as you know, this is our live legal call-in talk show. Hopefully you are all faithful listeners to FLA Law on the radio, and you tune in every Tuesday at 5. But if you don't, then you would obviously benefit from this little bit of an intro. So we are here to answer your legal questions live on the air, but we are personal injury attorneys. So, of course, that's going to be the focus of our conversation tonight, talking about, personal injury, civil litigation type matters. But, of course, if you have questions about other topics, feel free to give us a call. Lori and I have experience in the law and can take a stab at just about anything that you throw and hopefully give you some advice or at least point you in the right direction. And so in order to get your questions answered, I'm going to give you some call-in information and different ways to reach us on the show tonight, so that you can get your questions in. As I said, we are in the WTAN studio, so you'd have to call in to the studio in order to get your questions answered live on the air. That phone number is 727-441-3000. Again, that's 727-441-3000. That's going to be the phone number that you're going to call into tonight so that you can get your questions answered by Lori and I. If you are on social media and you would prefer to type your question as opposed to calling in, you can definitely find us on Facebook. We are streaming live right now in the studio. Hello to our viewers that are looking at us right now. Looks like we've got one person watching so far. Like, share, comment, send this over to your friends and family that are on Facebook if they have any questions. Anybody that's been involved in a personal injury matter, car accident, or anything of that nature that you think might benefit from tonight's broadcast, why don't you go ahead and send it over to them, ask them to tune in. They might get some really beneficial information tonight from the show. If you can't find us, I'll tell you how to spell our name. It's Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes, Injury Lawyers, and Perenich is spelled Perenich. So if you type that into the search bar on Facebook, you should see the page has that red circle around it letting you know that we are live right now, and you can just type your question right at the little comment section at the bottom, and I will read those out live over the air, and Lori and I will take a stab at answering whatever you throw at us. We're also on YouTube. If you don't have social media, but you want to tune in and watch live in the studio through YouTube, you can do that as well through Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers, and you can check us out on our YouTube channel. With that being said, I hope you know Lori by now. But if not, like I said, if you're new to the show, you're just tuning in for the first time, and you haven't had a chance to hear from us, or you haven't heard about Lori, I'm going to give her a chance to, of course, introduce herself, and then we'll dive into the topics for tonight.
Oh, very good. I'm always happy to be here. And I don't know why. I'm just thinking, here we are, the female dream team part of Perenich, Caulfield,
Yes,
Illinois.
Absolutely. I love it.
I've been with the law firm for 25 years, and I at our recent Christmas party got this beautiful little I don't know what you would call it, actually, like not exactly
Not quite a plaque
statue,
or a
but
trophy.
but it was something in between commemorating that, which was actually very, very nice. I have it on my desk, and it's
Well-deserved.
It's a reminder that time flies, because I've really enjoyed
Absolutely.
every moment at our firm. As you have shared, personal injury is what we do. We're trial lawyers.
Yes.
We're very committed to helping people go through a legal process that is so unfriendly.
Yes, and you're phenomenal at what you do, and we can't leave out the fact that you're board certified civil trial lawyer.
I was very, very happy. Beginning when I started with Perenich Carroll, it was originally Perenich and Carroll, but of course Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes now, because our founding partners, long retired, and Guy Perenich, rest his soul, passed on in 2018. But yes, when I started with the firm, I was able to participate in enough additional trials over my previous experience to become board certified, and that's something that is, when you're in the courtroom, you're happy to have had the opportunity to have that experience recognized. It's a relatively small percentage of lawyers in the state will go on to attain that. Yeah. So.
Well, I definitely appreciate you introducing yourself, and hopefully you all have heard Lori on the show over the past few months, and she gives wonderful advice. So the lines are open. If you have any questions, definitely give us a call. Lori, and she didn't get a chance to mention it, but she's worked right alongside our partner, Matthew Noyes, for years. And normally he would have been here tonight, but he is out for good reason. We just wanted to give a quick birthday shout out to his son, Jacob, who turned 18 years old today. And so Matt we're celebrating with his family, of course, rightfully so, celebrating Jacob's 18th birthday. So happy birthday, Jacob.
Yes, happy birthday to Jacob.
And he was also on the Kelly show yesterday, so we're giving him a break. So for tonight's show, we are going to be talking about some current events first, because I don't know if you noticed, but there were a few really odd car accident cases that were in the news here locally in Tampa Bay area just over the past 2 weeks. Now, I would say that that's unusual, but it's really not unique to our area. Believe it or not, I think a lot of these strange accidents and scenarios that we're about to get into probably happen more frequently than we would like to see. But it just, the fact that they happened over a very short span of time, I thought this was really interesting. And I said, let's talk about some of these, because we don't always get into some of these really peculiar cases that you hear about. And a lot of times cases like these, they come through our doors, right? Sure. And we meet with individuals who've been involved in some of these really odd, strange accidents. And you're like, what can I do here? And how can we help them? And so I wanted to read some of these current events and share with our listeners. Maybe they haven't heard about them. And then, of course, Lori and I will kind of discuss some of the things that we think, might be beneficial to know about these. So the first one, I think a lot of people probably heard about because it was on a lot of different news stations. But if not, let's read the story. Just last week, I believe it was, a 10-year-old boy, title says, boy takes family's car, causes crash on I-275 in St. Petersburg, troopers say. So the story goes on to say that the boy took a Nissan Altima without permission on a Thursday and sideswiped a pickup, according to the Florida Highway Patrol. The 10-year-old boy took a family's car one evening, and he drove it down the interstate in 275 in St. Petersburg, crashed into the pickup truck, and it says that the child was driving in the left lane and sideswiped a Ford F-250 that was headed north in the center lane. After the impact, the Nissan rotated and crashed into a bridge railing on the outside shoulder, and the Ford was able to come to a stop as well. They said that the boy did sustain some minor injuries, and the pickup truck, which had actually 3 adult men in it, fortunately were not injured. And it was reported that the child who was living in St. Pete had taken the vehicle from a family member without permission, and he had already been reported missing about 30 minutes prior to the crash. And then he was, of course, transported to the hospital and actually later Baker acted.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Didn't see that part.
Yeah, that was the headline of this 10-year-old boy. I would think that maybe it was a joyride, but it sounds like maybe some other factors were at play involving this young boy. But the question I think becomes is, fortunately, those 3 men that were hit in the vehicle were not injured, but let's assume that they were. And one of these men hypothetically came to us and said, Lori, I was just involved in an accident and I got hit by a 10-year-old boy on the highway and he had stolen his family member's vehicle. What can I do? Yeah, that's very interesting.
It is. Yeah, and when you're involved in personal injury for any number of years, I've come to feel like there's just an infinite number of ways people can become injured.
Yes.
This is a horror. I mean, you can't even imagine it. As lawyers that handle personal injury cases, we're always looking for, well, what argument will we be able to make on behalf of a case? And it's a little bit different when you have a situation with a minor child. So here, obviously, the child themselves they may be responsible in the sense that they caused the accident, but you would be looking to see if the parents had some responsibility.
Exactly. Right.
And that's kind of it's actually why I love the law, because it's not cut and dry.
It's definitely not. It's definitely one of those, it depends.
Right. So you could have a situation. There we go. Yeah.
Well, before we finish talking about this interesting and odd story, we definitely want to jump in and get our callers on the line. It sounds like we have Maria who's waiting on the line. Maria, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hi, Maria. How are you?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
Doing well. Go ahead with your legal question.
So I have a family member that suffers from long COVID. Is this something that you guys can help with Social Security?
Okay, so that's actually a really great question. And so I think obviously Lori can take a stab at it, but I think we'd need to know exactly what these long COVID symptoms look like, right?
Right. And so this is kind of in the same category as what we were talking about a moment ago, which is, nothing is really cut and dry. Mm-hmm. And so it really will depend on what the symptoms are. Social Security is looking to determine if a person has a medically determinable impairment. Exactly. And I do think that there is recognition now, or increasing recognition, that there are some instances of what they're calling long COVID. But it's not the diagnosis that matters. It's really what's happening that's limiting the individual.
As a result. Yeah.
So you have to have a doctor on board. Now, I would say it's absolutely something that we would look into, talk to the individuals, see what medical support there is.
Right.
But typically you would expect there probably would be, maybe some other things potentially going on, because for it to be something Social Security is going to look at, you're going to have disabling symptoms that have lasted for 12 consecutive months.
Right.
And likely ongoing, that would prevent the person from doing any work, really, basically.
Exactly. And so that would come along with some pretty detailed medical documentation over time. It sounds like this is something your family member has been dealing with for quite a while. And so hopefully they've been seeing doctors and getting the treatment and documenting what's going on.
I have another quick question, too.
Yeah.
This family member that I have only speaks Spanish. And would this be an issue with your office?
No, not at all. We absolutely have Spanish-speaking staff. We actually have a Spanish-speaking Social Security legal assistant. So definitely would not be something that would be an issue. And of course, if it sounds like, based on what Lori and I have suggested as far as the medical care, definitely call in. And of course, we'll get a Spanish-speaking individual on the line for you. If our Social Security legal assistant isn't available, we have other staff and also translation services that we can use. So definitely don't let that deter you. We have bilingual staff at our office, so absolutely give us a call.
Okay, great. And what number would I call?
Yeah, so you wouldn't call the number that you just dialed in for the station today. The phone number to our office at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes is 727-796-8282. You can also find us online at usalaw.com or voiceoftheinjured.com. And those are the best ways to get in contact with us. Of course, if you call the station when we're not here, you won't be able to reach us. So. Does that answer your question, Maria?
Yes, thank you so much.
No, thank you for calling,
Yes,
and
thanks for
hopefully look
calling.
forward to hearing from your family member.
Thank you.
All right. So that means the lines are open. And if you have calls like Maria, feel free to give us a call at 727-441-3000. That's the best number to call to get your question answered over the air tonight. We also have our Facebook live chat still going. So if you'd like to leave a comment on Facebook, feel free to do so. I do see a comment from Matt. It says, thanks for filling in for me. I'll bring a piece of cookie cake for you both. Thanks, Matt.
Wow.
We
Hey.
appreciate that.
Offer accepted.
We'll take the cookie cake. So back to the article, the 10-year-old boy. So obviously, there's a few different ways that we could look at this type of a claim, assuming, the parties were injured. So first thing I know you mentioned the parents, right?
Right. And what becomes the issue is, did the parents have some negligence in effect in allowing the circumstance to unfold as it did? And
How
that's
did
where
you gain access to the
right.
vehicle?
That's where there'd be a much more detailed analysis needed, because that's really the key question, obviously. And then the law does suggest that, not suggest, but normally a parent is not responsible for what we would call a criminal act or a tortious act, which would be a personal wrong.
Right.
The parent is really not responsible unless there was some aspect in which the parent was culpable because they should have known and they allowed the child to be in a situation where the child could harm others. And so here, obviously, anybody has to wonder, how did that child get access to the car?
Right.
And it's amazing the child was able to drive the car.
And on the interstate,
as long as the child did before there was any kind of an impact. So those are things that would certainly raise a lot of questions about that. And
I remember doing some research some years ago about a vehicle that had been stolen, but the person that had taken it lived in the home with the individual, and so there was some debate about whether the vehicle was actually left available for that person to have access. And I believe the argument that we were making is that the keys were readily accessible. They had been able to use the vehicle in the past.
Right.
And although they didn't have explicit permission, that they had implied permission because they had access to the vehicle and had been able to use it before. And so and I can't recall just how the case law fell on that issue, but I think those are kind of the things that you look at. And I don't know if it's as common nowadays, but there are some parents that probably do, let their kids run to the store and do little things that they're not supposed to. And so that'd be a really interesting fact pattern to find out.
It's now one of the things that surprised me. I did a little checking as I knew we were going to discuss these interesting cases, because it is sort of surprising that the parent has to know the child has a propensity for engaging in the particular conduct. Now, that would come up, maybe say the kid fights, goes after other friends, something like that.
Or he'd taken the car multiple times before.
Yeah, or some way, because obviously the child has driven a car before.
He obviously knew what to do.
And at a very young age. So, and then if there were some mental health issues, we don't know from a newspaper account. There could be mental health issues because the child got himself way over his head. He didn't know how to get out of it, perhaps.
Very clearly.
Poor thing. So I hope we hope everybody, thank goodness, there was no significant injury.
Thank God. That could have turned out a lot worse. Yeah. Now, obviously, in the event that there is no responsibility or liability on the parents, and there's clear that this young boy had no permission from no one to be using this vehicle, then in the traditional sense, there may not be anyone that you can pursue in that regard. How does that bring into play coverage. If, let's say, the driver that got hit by this 10-year-old driver, I don't even know if I want to call him a driver because he's not licensed, but this 10-year-old boy causes this accident that results in injuries and there's no coverage to pursue. What about my own coverage if I have it?
That's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure in that context. I mean, we certainly would be looking at that. Yeah. But ordinarily, it's not like it's not really a phantom driver situation.
Right. You know who the driver is.
Right. And if the child had exposure to the car, driven the car before, obviously the parent knew that. I mean, I think that's where, and there, the would clearly apply depending on if there was inadequate coverage that the parents had.
Right.
So that would be clear. If, let's say, it truly was totally out of the blue, no way anybody could ever have known. Right. Which is a little hard to believe, unfortunately.
They had no reason to suspect.
If there really was nothing, no way to know, I'm not really sure. But I think, as in most cases over the years, you find that, and this is the sense of negligence law, really, that when you dig a little bit, I mean, I think you would find here that there certainly would be arguments about the responsibility. But if, in fact, no responsibility at all, I'd have to do a little more research on that.
Yeah,
so you still come to your personal injury attorney
to look into it.
Because this is
so many factors.
Right.
Yeah.
There are many factors.
Very fact intensive to determine where you go with that kind of case. You shouldn't just assume, oh my gosh, it's a 10-year-old boy. I'm pretty much out of luck here, because that may not be the case. And they said that they had reported him missing 30 minutes before, but that begs the question, how long had he been gone? Right. And did they know that he had the vehicle that entire time? And there's so many different questions. So, I think that would be obviously a very interesting case. And of course, the weirder the case, the more likely you should call a lawyer.
Oh, absolutely. No, really.
So I threw out that phrase, and I probably should explain it a little bit better, just so that we are informing our listeners about what coverage is, because I'm sure we're going to touch on it again, given that we're talking about all these very strange cases. So coverage is something that you definitely want to check your policy for, because that is the kind of coverage that applies when you are hurt or injured by a motorist who does not have bodily injury coverage, or as Lori mentioned, a phantom vehicle, which would most cases be like a hit and run type of a scenario.
Which really, I guess, you think about it, I mean, the child was negligent. Mm-hmm. So the question becomes, can you impute that to the parent, which is usually what you'd want to do, or have that fall back on them. But, part of what happens in our laws, there is a little bit of an area of development because the fact patterns can be so different. And I didn't see that particular fact pattern come up, but I believe that one way or another, there probably could be a claim brought.
That would be the argument that I would certainly try to make. And then, of course, it's up to the insurance company to try to fight that and show in some way how it doesn't apply. But that would, of course, be the first thing that I would argue, is that the child was negligent, or that the parents negligently supervised the child, or whatever the case may be, and then let the insurance company decide if they have defenses and whatnot. But the key takeaway here is, it sounds like it may be difficult to prove a case against this boy or make a claim against the bodily injury. So in the event that something like this happened, you want to have the uninsured motorist coverage or the underinsured motorist coverage, so that you're protecting yourself from these kinds of very strange scenarios.
Because what do we see happen all the time? So let's say that investigation reveals that the parents just really, they weren't as attentive as they should have been. Okay, let's just say that occurred. And it turns out you've got a great claim, but they don't have any real insurance to speak of. Maybe they have a $10,000 liability policy or something
minimal.
Yeah. So that's what uninsured motorist coverage is designed to protect you from. Is a situation where somebody causes an accident and they are not adequately insured for the damages that they've caused.
Right. And then that begs the question, a lot of times people just assume that they have it. And I think the number one thing that I hear all the time is, oh, I've got full coverage.
Yes.
Does that mean that they have coverage?
No, that means they have almost no coverage.
Exactly.
Isn't it amazing? It's kind of like an advertising slogan, which in the insurance industry, oh, you've got full coverage.
It's kind of a misnomer. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's full coverage in terms of the minimum that is required by the state of Florida
by law,
to be able to drive your vehicle, which must be insured with, quote, full coverage. But it's $10,000 in property damage, basically, and it's all the PIP, which is the medical payments portion of it. But it has nothing to do with actually protecting a driver, another person that you may have injured in an automobile accident. If you don't even have to have liability coverage initially, So it's and it's not anything we throw out terms like liability coverage, UM. The average person obviously would have no reason
no idea,
know any of that. And so today, it used to be you'd be talking to your insurance person maybe on the phone, or maybe you go into their office. Well, today it's all done many times on the computer with all these electronic signature.
And people are doing it themselves. They're figuring out their own policies. They're selecting their own coverages. They're rejecting things. They are waiving rights. They don't really know. They're just trying to get their premiums down.
Yes, and understandable, but
and then they're giving up a lot of benefits and rights and don't really understand the coverages that they have. And I believe we've said it numerous times on the air. If you are unsure about what kind of coverage you should have, what you currently have, if you would like us to review your policy, more than happy to do that as a courtesy. You can certainly give our office a call. You can send over your deck sheet or a screenshot of your insurance coverages through your mobile app or whatever it is. And we'd be happy to take a quick look at it. It's very easy to determine what kind of coverage you have. And a lot of times people are surprised to know that they don't have the kind of coverage they thought they did. And that's one of the number one questions we ask in an auto intake after someone's been injured and they come into our office. We ask, do you know if you have uninsured motorist coverage? And most people don't. They don't know. They're like, I think I do. I'm not really sure. And so that is something I definitely encourage our listeners to take a look at, figure out if you have that. Give us a call if you'd like us to review your policy for you, and we do that certainly for free as a courtesy. Now, with that being said, I think it's a good time to take a short break. We've got a few more little articles we want to touch on and some topics to discuss in these current events. The lines are open, so if you want to get a call in for a legal question, the number is going to be 727-441-3000. We'll see you right back after this commercial break.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
In 1955, the law firm now known as Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes made a decision. Instead of taking whatever cases came through their doors, they decided to focus specifically on personal injury. 64 years later, the law firm is one of Clearwater's longest-running personal injury firms. Available 24 hours a day with offices in Clearwater and throughout Tampa Bay, they're ready to put decades of experience to work for you if you or a loved one has been injured in a car accident or injured due to someone's negligence or recklessness. If you feel overwhelmed, uncertain, or unsure about your next steps after being involved in an accident or after a loved one sustained serious injuries due to someone else's negligence, call Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes at 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. That's 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. Non-attorney spokesman.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
And we are back in the studio with FLA Law live on the radio. Hopefully you've been tuned in since 5. We have been talking about some very interesting car accident news articles that have happened here in our local Tampa Bay area over the past 2 weeks. And we were just talking about one that was very big on the news. I saw it on several news stations about the 10-year-old boy who caused an accident on 275 one evening. And it was quite a big backup. And so we talked about that as far as how that could play out if he had, in fact, injured the other parties that were in the vehicle that he hit. And so Lori, of course, did a great job kind of going over some of those scenarios. But here's article number 2. Let's talk about the next one. This was about a week ago, right here in Clearwater, where we are airing from. And this is about a freak accident, is basically what the author titled it. Freak accident, tire bounces off vehicle on Florida road, slams into car carrying mother and child. So essentially what happened here is a mother and her daughter, fortunately, who are okay, after a tire came off a vehicle and slammed into their windshield one Sunday evening, according to the Clearwater police. In the Clearwater Police Department social media post, they said that the mother and the daughter were driving on US 19, and I believe it. I've had so many different things fly off cars on 19. My goodness, 19 is a very dangerous road. So they're driving on 19 at 6:30 p.m. on a Sunday when the tire came off of a southbound vehicle, bounced over the median, and essentially smashed into their windshield. The Clearwater Police Department posted some photos of the vehicle and showing the extent of the damage. The majority of it was the windshield, which is completely busted out, and a portion of the roof actually caved in as a result of the impact with the tire. Thankfully, the little girl was in the back seat, so nobody was riding in that front passenger seat, and fortunately, no one was hurt, the mom or the daughter. So this is a freak accident for sure, Lori, where there was no other vehicle involved per se, but there's this tire that just comes out of nowhere. We assume it comes off of the vehicle. I don't know if it fell off the back of the bed or if it actually was on the vehicle. It doesn't really give us a full description of how this tire came off the vehicle, because I can kind of vision maybe they're hauling tires on the back. I don't know. But anyway, here comes this tire coming across the median and crashes into the windshield of this vehicle with the mom and the daughter in it. Again, let's just assume, fortunately, they were not hurt, but let's just assume they were injured and they come into our office. How do we approach this scenario?
So once again, it's a matter of investigation, because what holds someone responsible in our legal system is that they acted negligently.
Right.
So you'd really have to identify the other vehicle and what the circumstances were that allowed a tire to come flying off like it did, and we're kind of talking off air. We've had a few of these over the years, and normally there is a maintenance issue or something that's going on. And so so often what ends up happening, if you have a case like that and the person's been injured and there is insurance on the other side with a liability insurance to cover for negligence, then it becomes a case you open up, and you may even, in those scenarios, you have to do some investigation. And you might even end up in a lawsuit where you have subpoena power to find out what was really going on there. But, most likely, there was some aspect of maintenance issue that the person should have been attending to.
Exactly.
And then in that scenario, then the mother and daughter, had they been injured, we're grateful they weren't. But had there been injury, then there would be a basis for making a claim, just as you would in any automobile accident.
Right. And that was something that we talked about off the air as far as the maintenance issue. The argument being, well-maintained vehicles don't just have tires flying off of them. So it gives you the impression that something must have been unreasonable under those circumstances. And even with the scenario where I'm envisioning maybe a truck hauling tires, were they properly secured?
Right.
Were they, on that vehicle in the proper way that would prevent them from coming off in the middle of traffic? So there's a lot of different things you could look at there.
Yeah, there could be a lot of questions that could come up. You could maybe you had your tires put on by somebody, and you don't know anything about that. Maybe they didn't properly.
You thought they were done well.
That's number one. So there can be a lot of questions. That can be a more difficult case potentially. But it, again, like we said earlier, it depends on the facts, the particular facts of the case, and it is a situation where it is always worthwhile to consult an attorney that handles these kind of claims if you've got an injury to see if there is some way to make some sort of compensation for you.
And I think urgency is pretty key in that type of a situation, because if you think about it, it sounds like the mom and the daughter were driving in one direction and the vehicle that lost the tire was going the opposite way. The tire comes across the median, so it may be a situation where that car got away, they got down the road. Maybe they didn't even realize they lost a tire. I don't know the full facts there. And so it may be a situation where you don't even know who that person is.
Right.
And so the sooner you come in and, speak with an attorney like ourselves, you can take those steps to try to figure that out. And on a road like 19, there's businesses that might be there. There could be video cameras or other CCTV type footage that might reveal exactly what happened and who that person was, maybe capture license plates. You just never know.
But if I just want to emphasize that's the kind of thing that if something happens, maybe you initially think you're okay, but then it turns out, no, you're really not okay. You really don't want to let a lot of time go by, because if there are complexities in actually establishing who the at-fault vehicle was, and those are things that it doesn't benefit from a lot of time passing.
Exactly. And that you're absolutely right, because people will oftentimes wait for the injuries to subside and they just assume maybe they'll get better over time. And we don't always know initially how injured we are. And when it is realized, that could be weeks or maybe even a month down the line. And a lot of that evidence that we may have needed could potentially no longer exist. Nowadays, with cameras and security footage, a lot of businesses just don't store them for very long. And so there could have been footage, maybe it happened right in front of a gas station or something like that, where it would have existed had we, searched sooner or preserved it sooner. So definitely think that's an interesting scenario.
Yes, another very interesting scenario.
And I feel like all roads lead back to UM coverage. That's always something you want to look at, because if you do have this vehicle who's, arguably negligent for, negligent maintenance or whatever the case may be, and they get away. They keep going down the road. They don't stop. They don't, give you any insurance information. You can't find that vehicle. Then one of the first things I think we're going to do is argue that this is a UM claim. And you certainly want to have that and make sure you're carrying it for these kinds of what you would call freak accidents.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yes. Where you may not be able to readily establish the vehicle at fault, or you do, but the coverage isn't there. There's very limited coverage, which is a very, very common situation.
Very common, especially in these times that we're living in with inflation and the economy. People have a hard time, paying their bills, and they let their coverage lapse, or they take their coverage down to a minimum.
Right.
And so that's something to be aware of when you're riding around on the roadways. You consider that there may be a lot of people out there who are struggling financially. They don't have the coverage. And so you have to have the coverage to protect yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So that brings us to our last and final current event that is, again, very, very strange. Just happened a few days ago. I want to say 2 days ago, actually. I'm not that familiar with the restaurant. I've never eaten here, but I've seen it. So I've driven past this place, and I've not driven past it since this accident, though. So I wonder what it looks like now. But this is an incident about a vehicle that crashed into the Clearwater Skyline Chili restaurant and a dentist office early on Sunday morning. And the article reads that the driver of a Hyundai Sonata was charged with DUI after catapulting through 2 Clearwater businesses early Sunday morning, including the popular Skyline Chili restaurant, according to the city of Clearwater. This Hyundai Sonata was traveling west on Gulf to Bay Boulevard when the vehicle veered out of control at 6:45 in the morning and jumped the median, crossed the eastbound lanes before crashing into the nearby Strip Shopping Center, which, of course, is slamming in front of the Greenberg Dental and then coming to rest inside the Skyline Chili restaurant. This crash now, of course, happened at 6:45 in the morning on a Sunday.
Thank goodness.
So that, of course, leads you to believe that, fortunately, there was likely no one there at any of these businesses, thank God. However, let's say it was normal business hours, 2 p.m. on a Thursday, when there could have likely have been many employees working at both offices.
Right.
That could create a lot of scenarios when it comes to individuals who are hurt while in the course and scope of their employment. So let's say one of these Clearwater Skyline employees who hypothetically could have been injured in this accident, they come into the office to meet with you, Lori. Where does that claim go?
Okay, well, there'd be many, many different aspects to it. So if an employee is injured while they're working, then they have a workers' compensation claim. Mm-hmm. And under the workers' compensation system, you have to report your claim. You have to follow and go to the doctors that the workers' comp insurance sends you to. So there would be that aspect of the claim. And then there would also just be an automobile accident claim against the driver that slammed into the restaurant. And that would be governed by all the things we're talking about. Now, one thing we can be pretty sure, negligence would be not hard to prove in this particular scenario.
Not in this scenario, not at all. Yeah.
No, so you'd have that, but
and he can't really get away. Sounds like his vehicle was stuck right there in the middle of the restaurant.
Got all that, So then you're back to our old favorite: is the insurance coverage. Did this person actually have a sufficient amount of insurance coverage to cover themselves and for what they do? And so that would probably be the bigger factor there. And then hopefully the injured employee in that example would also hopefully have uninsured motorist coverage if there wasn't adequate liability coverage on the part of the driver that caused the accident. So you'd have both of those cases sort of interplaying, and that's not too uncommon to have an automobile accident.
Right,
and,
we do see that often.
And then a workers' comp aspect to it too. Mm-hmm. A person that's injured while in the course and scope of their employment will always have the workers' compensation claim. But if there's also an automobile accident involved in it, like maybe you were driving for your employer to go deliver something in that scenario and are in an automobile accident, you would also have the automobile accident aspect of it. So those would be the main two that we would think about.
Right. And I think the major key that I think people will need to understand is there's kind of several layers of benefits that you could be entitled to in that scenario, because, depending on the severity of the injuries, when you have this vehicle slamming into your place of work, if you were really hurt, then you may be out of work, right?
Right.
And so that then calls into question, what benefits can they claim in terms of wage loss or medical treatment? Are they entitled to both the workers' comp indemnity wages, or should they go under the PIP? So that's something that I think would be good to help explain.
Because a lot of people, really don't know what to do. Mm-hmm, so the main thing is you definitely want your employer, and in this scenario, they would obviously know, but you want to follow your employer's protocol.
Got a big hole in your wall there.
Yeah, they got that, So, but with workers' comp, you would be entitled, if you're out of work for over a week, then at the order, basically, the workers' comp doctor, then you will become eligible for what they call the workers' comp indemnity benefits, which would be, depending on they have a formula for it, but basically it's if you are totally out, then it's 66 2/3% of your average weekly wage. It is capped to a maximum of $1,000 or a little bit more. I think it's gone up maybe $1,200 now, but but you'd have wage benefits. Now you also can collect 60% of your wage loss through your personal injury protection.
Right. And you don't have to wait a whole week to be able to claim
you
those.
can get that. There's not like a little, and with workers' comp, you have to be you have to be out a full week, and then you'll collect it at the end of 3 weeks because they pay every 2 weeks. So it's there's so you probably would be looking at both.
Right.
Sometimes people prefer not to be pursuing workers' comp because of you're stuck going to their doctors and that sort of thing, and there are various reasons. But again, those are pretty complex decisions for a lawyer to advise on.
Exactly.
So an individual should be speaking to an attorney on that to get input, because again, I think the theme for today, it's not cut and dry very often.
Right. And these are very, of course, odd scenarios, but also common in the sense that we deal with very similar, situations all the time where there's, like you said, an auto and a workers' comp connection there. And so, as Lori said, you definitely want to speak to an attorney to get a full understanding of that, because some benefits have to be repaid, right? So if you decide you want to allow workers' comp to pay your wage loss and you're seeing those doctors, maybe you don't have health insurance or you don't have PIP or something like that, and you chose to go under workers' comp, which, of course, very much have the right to do so. Although I tend to see it the other way where people don't want to go under work comp. But let's say they exclusively treat under workman's comp. They use those benefits, but they also wish to pursue this driver that came careening through the business and crashed into their place of work. Do they have to now pay back workers' comp or PIP for these benefits that they're using?
So for PIP, you don't, but workers' comp does have a subrogation, what we call a subrogation right. So they are entitled to be reimbursed for anything they paid on the claim. Now, it is very much subject to negotiation, and there are formulas that are used, and it depends on a lot of factors. So it's not like it's going to end up that you're going to pay 100% back.
Right.
But there are many different factors.
There's the Manfredo calculation, just to get very technical.
Things that would definitely put our audience to sleep if we haven't already. And I don't think we have, hopefully.
Yes, I hope not. I think these articles have been quite interesting.
It's been a wild week in personal injuries there. So.
So that's absolutely something to remember, that there's several layers of benefits. There's both the auto and the workers' comp. They can both be utilized. Some of them do require reimbursement. Some of them do not. But the best way to really get a full understanding of all this, if you find yourself in one of these situations, is, of course, to give us a call. And like I've said several times, you can call us at our office, 796-8282. You can also find us online at usalaw.com and kind of get an idea of what are my rights, what am I entitled to? I've been injured and I really don't know which way to go here. Because I was hurt on the job, but then I also want to pursue this other driver. And so that's always something I think when you get hurt on the job, you want to see an attorney about, because sometimes there's negligence on the part of some non-party, right?
Yes.
And so I don't know if people always realize that workers' comp may not be your only remedy, right? This is kind of going a bit off script here, but I think that's something that people should definitely come to us to look at, right? If they have, let's say it's a slip and fall scenario where they're delivering something for their employer, but yet they're off site at some other property, and we believe that there was negligence involved that led to the slip and fall, right?
Right. So that ends up adding a different elements, because when you're working, anything completely within your work environment would normally just be governed under the workers' comp. But if there is some other party involved, that it's not a part of the employer, and they are negligent, then you will have that claim. And it would often come up in the context of something like a premise situation where there was a slip and fall or a trip and fall, something of that nature. Yeah. Now, one thing I was going to say, we're getting a lot more email contact forms. I see all the time where people just shoot off their question. And that's a great way. It comes into our intake. They take a look at it. They review it with us. And then, it's something that we can then follow up and set up a phone conference or an in-person meeting if needed, to kind of give a little bit of advice on these situations and see whether it's something that actually would merit opening up a claim.
Absolutely. That's definitely something that we do. People don't always have the time. They're at work, they're busy, they have children, and they just can't call in, but they want to know, what are my rights? What can I do in the situation? I've had a very complicated issue. I'm hurt. And they can just type it right in at their leisure. Some people, they type these very late at night.
Yes, and we get some kind of crazy questions too. Yes. But we do look at them all. But I think it's a pretty useful thing if your question is this something where I actually should see the lawyer? And then and we can look at that easily. And then the crazy question, we can say, oh, no. But the others, we can say, I think so.
Right. And it's usually the crazy questions are the ones that come at like 2 or 3 in the morning. But like Lori said, we look at them all, we review them all and determine if it's something that we can help with. And sometimes, like these 3 crazy stories we've read today, there's still a chance that we may be able to assist.
Right.
And I wanted to go back and talk about too how the vehicle, the DUI driver slammed through the Clearwater Skyline restaurant. Somebody might think, oh my gosh, they caused so much damage to that restaurant. There's no way there's going to be any insurance coverage left to pay for my injury claim. But those are actually 2 separate claims.
Yes, good point.
The policies are not the same. So people might get discouraged and think, I'm not even going to bother to call a lawyer. It's going to cost so much for them to fix that restaurant. I'll never get a penny. I'm just going to forget about it. That's not true, right? Right.
It is. The personal injury portion is different than property damage, and they're separate coverages. Or if they are combined single limit, sometimes you'll see that with a business, but it's going to be a large amount of coverage. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So that's really not a concern. And person should not really try to evaluate for themselves they think is the insurance issue or whether it's collectible. That's what we can help with.
That's what we're here for. Yeah. I actually sat in a global mediation on behalf of our office at one point when there was a similar situation. Fortunately, the vehicle did not make it through our office, but we had a situation where our sign was damaged and there was significant damage to other property as well, involving the city, their light posts, and all kinds of things. And so none of the injured parties were involved in that mediation, but everyone who lost property had to be involved in that mediation. And so I thought it was quite interesting to see. It had to all kind of be handled very similarly, but the injured parties were not involved because that's a separate claim, separate policy. And so we're obviously skilled in all of these kinds of claims and can assist and kind of advise when that happens. As Lori said, don't try to figure it out on your own because there's so many different layers. I feel like we've been pulling back the layers all this entire show that could really go in many different directions, right?
That is so true.
And so obviously my one key, I think, takeaway for tonight's show would probably be just call us. When in doubt, give us a call and let us evaluate the situation and try to determine if there's a claim that can be made. And if so, which parties are going to be responsible and how can we do that, right? And one last question before we wrap up our show for the evening, Lori. I know that I've been seeing this a lot lately, and I briefly touched on it with people that are dealing with hard times, financially, and their policies are not always active at the time of a car accident. Should people let that deter them from pursuing an injury claim? And they say, I don't have PIP. I'm sorry. I let my policy lapse. I don't have any auto insurance. Right. Should I not call you now because of that?
No, if you don't have auto insurance, but you were not at fault in the accident.
Right.
Yeah, no, you should still call or shoot us an email and let us determine whether we can help because, that wouldn't be the issue. Now, it might impact the point of having the PIP really is so that you can get medical care yourself with an insurance type thing. But people treat all the time with beyond that personal injury protection, or today, if you don't treat within 15 days, then you can't rely upon that anyway. So.
Right. So as I said, when in doubt, give us a call. And you can find us at usalaw.com or voiceoftheinjured.com. Lori, it's been a pleasure.
It always is. We have
this
fun.
show has flown by. We are the attorneys at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes, and you've been listening to FLA Law on the radio. Guys, we'll see you next Tuesday at 5 o'clock.
WTAN, Clearwater,
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.